Today is Tuesday, the 15th of August, 2017. My name is Chris Ellis, and now it's time for something a little bit different. I'm introducing a pilot show called Block Digest, which comes to you live from the Bitcoin Mumble chat room. And I will just also announce the Bitcoin clock. It is block height 480,673. It's been like a long time coming, but we're here with you. We've been sort of brainstorming this idea over the last couple of days. We tried to come to you yesterday. And we basically want to do a new style of chat with a group of people that have been hanging out on some of the chat rooms in Bitcoin for some time. And these are the kind of places like on TeamSpeak and the Mumble server, and some people are on Discord. You've got a whole load of people over on Telegram who are on 24/7, like round the clock, and they're consuming media, they're consuming information and news. And a lot of the time they're just traders, and they want that information because they want to be able to trade Bitcoin and buy and sell, and maybe Ethereum as well. But also a lot of people just want to keep the pulse going, and they just want to know what's going on in the ground beneath them. And I guess, like, you know, we were brainstorming ideas and we were like, what do we want to do? And the plan for this, and we'll see how this develops over time, is that we want to have the chat room in the background. So that's like the studio audience that anyone can join. And then we want like YouTube, like where people can come in, get on the mic, get on the camera and talk. And we're going to go over some topics. And today's topics are, well, there is only one topic, Bitcoin in space, I guess. So Shinobi, I'm here joined by Shinobi from the chat. How you doing, man?
Hello, world.
Talk to me.
So, yeah, Bitcoin in space. I guess we are both figuratively and literally moving towards the moon. So, yeah, I guess today is the day that Blockstream announces they have 2/3 of a live satellite downlink piggybacking on communication satellites to deliver block updates in real time. This is a huge development. I mean, this is radically going to shape the topology of the network, how people can access the network, most importantly, the costs of accessing the network. This is really opening a whole new door of potential utility for people who had no access before to get out of the Bitcoin network.
Yeah, fantastic. And what this basically means in practice is that people can now download the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, via satellite link. How fast will that be? What kind of speeds are we going to get?
It's only in like the kilobits a second. It's kind of a slow downlink, but realistically speaking, it's not like we're trying to get every unconfirmed transaction immediately. It's get the block data so that you can continue validating with the chain tip. So really the only issue is getting it in a small enough time span that you can comfortably get each block before the next one arrives. So as long as we have that nice equilibrium of delivery time versus the average block time, you're getting things in a timely enough manner to keep updated with the top of the chain.
And I want to draw people's attention because also Agnes is here. Agnes, you and I have been talking for a long time on various different chat rooms, and I always really appreciate your insight. And I want to just quote Adam Back in this CoinDesk article, because he says there is some coincidence between countries with poor internet infrastructure and unstable currencies. The people who are in direct need of Bitcoin are those currently have unstable access to Bitcoin. And Alex, we talked about this before in the past. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why this is important for people that are not connected?
Oh, it's getting everyone connected. Providing this means outside of traditional networks is huge. For Africa, for example, right, there's a large issue with network coverage, right? I believe, Chris, you were saying earlier that at one point it was faster to actually just go by SneakerNet and to deliver a 4 GB file to a place in Africa.
Yeah, that was actually a couple of years ago. There was a news story of a guy who tried to upload a file from his London, I think it was like a London apartment, to a South African property. And he got on the plane and with a memory stick of a copy of the file and was able to arrive sooner than the download over the internet, because that's how bad the internet was in South Africa.
Yeah, that's just incredible. So this helps us to mitigate those issues. If you're in a, you know, just a terrible reception area and you want to have valid transactions, or you don't trust your ISP locally even, this is the solution to that, you know?
Yeah.
I think there's...
So one of the issues that came up when I was in South Africa and I was meeting like people from Zimbabwe and obviously Alakanani in Botswana and Kenya, and there were people from all over the different places, also a couple of friends from Sierra Leone, is they told me, well, okay, you can get online, but you have to like buy prepaid cards oftentimes, and then you get so many gigabytes per day. But then when it runs out, you're still allowed access to certain things like Facebook, for example. So it's actually not net neutral. There's no net neutrality here. This is the concept, net neutrality. And so you're sort of allowed access to these walled gardens and these sort of private companies that want to let you, you know, you can access our website for free, but if you want access to the proper internet, this decentralized project where, you know, there's no permission required in order to have a say and speak, then that's going to cost you extra, right? And so obviously that prohibits people from like coming onto a YouTube Hangout or doing a Skype call unless they've got a lot of money. And then when we were looking into buying internet access for Alakanani, again, there were lots of hurdles in the way. Like she had to have something installed, like an antenna installed on her property, and it would often cut out, and the terms weren't clear, like how much bandwidth she was going to get, when she would be cut off every now and again. And it turned out the bandwidth had expired, and it wasn't quite clear how many gigabytes of data she was getting. So what this allows is for people to be able to have access just to the blockchain to update their nodes. Can it be SPV nodes as well, or is it just full nodes? Does anyone know?
There's no reason whatsoever that it couldn't be an SPV wallet as well. Because if you've been following Nopara at all, he's been doing the work with Hidden Wallet and Tumblebit. His SPV architecture is completely different than most other things out there. As opposed to like using a Bloom filter to grab the output and address statuses from a full node, it actually just grabs the entire block and then sends from a wallet's creation address. Obviously, you're not going to get any transactions that pre-exist that wallet's creation. It can just grab the blocks in series going forward from that point and then update anything related to its own outputs. So you could potentially have like that type of software in addition to a full node plug into a feed like this. And a little side point I hadn't really thought of, you got me thinking when you were discussing like how in some third world areas you still have access to these like walled gardens like Facebook, even when your data plan goes out. Well, the nice thing about like how this architecture works is you have this constant stream from these satellite links that cost you nothing except the hardware to pick it up. And that's the bulk of the data really necessary in interacting with the Bitcoin network, just all the things you need to validate everything. Whereas a transaction, that's only like maybe a few hundred bytes, a few kilobytes. Like that could easily be routed through like a service like Facebook. Like you just take the serialized transaction, post it somewhere, and somebody can just take it from there and relay it. So you not only have the essentially free access to what you need to validate, but through walled gardens like that, it's just bytes, and you just put it out there and somebody can push it to the network, and you have access both to validation and the ability to propagate your own transactions.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize, like, some people might wonder why this is important. When you just access the Bitcoin blockchain via a light node or an SPV wallet, say on your phone, you're not downloading the whole blockchain, which means that you may not be connected to the blockchain, the longest chain, right? The proof of work that everyone agrees with. You may be an imposter's chain, and you have to trust that server that you're connecting to that's only giving you the data from the blockchain that you need to validate your own transactions. And people may know who've seen me previously in other projects that I did a full node project where I went around and I built these little Raspberry Pi full nodes. Since then, we've had a lot of rhetoric from people we may know who say, fuck off, and like shit like, I want full nodes to cost $20,000. But what this does enable is like, okay, if we trust this Blockstream satellite, then we're happy to like download this copy of the blockchain. When more satellites start appearing, you'll have more independent sources from which to compare their version of the blockchain with this version of the blockchain. You only need two people to agree on what the truth is in order for there to begin the consensus, the Nakamoto consensus. And this is so that you don't have to outsource your trust to some financial institution. You don't have to trust the bank that it's giving you the real information. You can be sure and you can validate it for yourself.
Yeah, and even in the interim, before like other companies or services start offering feeds like this, just taking the feed from the Blockstream satellites, all you need to compare that against is the headers that you get from some other source. So that's like a much lower data requirement to actually like take what you're getting from Blockstream and then verify it. You only have to get the headers from somewhere else.
Yeah,
and
that's
then that
right.
guarantees that the data content is the same as what you're getting from
I mean, I could probably pull up like a graphic to explain it a little bit better in a moment or two. But basically, when people transmit transactions over the network, every TX, every transaction has its own cryptographic hash that identifies it. That is very, very difficult to manipulate or change. And you don't have to download every single transaction. The header of each block also has its own cryptographic hash, which can identify all of those transactions inside of there. So you don't actually need to see all of the transactions. You only need to see what's called the block header. Now, all the block headers are then put together and form something called a Merkle root over time. And people, again, that are familiar with some of the videos that I've done will know that sometimes I read out the Merkle root as a form of a timestamp on the videos to prove that this video was produced at this time and no time prior. So yeah, you form what's called a Merkle tree. And I want to also point out, just to make sure that we've covered it, that Blockstream haven't launched a satellite, right? Guys, they basically just used a satellite that's already up in space and they're piggybacking off of. Can anyone talk to that?
Yes, this is actually one of the, because if anybody remembers, like putting a node in space, it's not really an entirely new idea in this ecosystem. It's something a good number of people have talked about in the past. And Jeff Garzik, I believe, in 2014, actually put together a design for a CubeSat to launch up. And like this is kind of like an iteration past ideas, improving it in a few different ways. Like for instance, with Garzik's idea with cube satellites, those are very small devices, so the power output isn't really as great, which means that on the ground you're going to need a wider antenna or like a wider capturing device to actually pick up the data and be able to read it intelligibly. And then as well, CubeSat in low Earth orbit, you can't really guarantee that that orbit is going to stay stable for more than like 18 to 25 months, and it would require a wide satellite of like I think it's more than 20 satellites to cover the entire Earth's surface in coverage, and then you would have to be replacing them like every year and a half to 2 years. Whereas with what Blockstream is doing, they're piggybacking on pre-existing communication satellites, so they have more power available. So a stronger signal, which means you need a smaller like antenna or capturing device on the ground to actually get intelligible data. And as well, it's in a higher orbit, so you're not going to have to worry about replacing them every few years. And it's also in a kind of a social game theoretical context. It's not just a Bitcoin node. So like if we had put up something like what Garzik was talking about, the disincentives for shooting that down with anti-satellite weaponry. Let's say if China decides to get very anti-Bitcoin, if that satellite is only delivering Bitcoin data, the disincentive to shoot it down isn't really as strong. But where now that's tied into actual communication infrastructure, you're not just shooting down like some small unconnected company's Bitcoin satellite. That's actually major world infrastructure. And the disincentives will be much greater because the consequences of doing that would be much greater for somebody.
Right, right. Well, let's talk a little bit about Jeff Garzik, if that's okay. I don't know if Mr. Hoddle wants to jump on the mic at this point. But basically, this is from the Segwit2x Slack channel, is that right? Right up here on my screen. Everyone's gone quiet. And so basically, Jeff Garzik, had this idea. He's been in the Segwit2x Slack. He's saying Blockstream was the third with this idea, and it's the second to get space after Outernet. What is Outernet? Anyone know? Everyone's gone quiet.
Yes, I'm not really too familiar with the details, but it's I know there's a project, if you're familiar with the chip computer. It's kind of like a Raspberry Pi equivalent,
Yeah.
but it's just a radio delivered transmission protocol that's piggybacking on pre-existing satellites, and it's just kind of like a project playing around with like what we can do with low cost satellite access to internet. So it's kind of like a project that's sort of iterating towards what Elon Musk is trying to do, like literally blanketing the entire globe with internet access through satellite coverage.
Right. Okay. Oh, yes. Here we go. Here we got the diagrams right here. But this again is low orbit, right? So these things would burn up in 18 months or whatever the time frame is. They're not designed to be long lasting.
I'm not actually sure on the specific hardware these are piggybacking on. I'm not. I haven't really.
I don't imagine this is. I don't imagine this is going to be as stable as one of the commercial satellites that's been rented previously. But yeah, essentially, he's saying that Alternet are already there. They already did it. It's easy to pay existing satellites to broadcast data. Long discussion on Bitcoin talk about pros and cons, and maybe we can fish out that article that he's talking about. And I don't know. I don't want to talk to or speak to the kind of the tensions that might exist between different communities, and Blockstream obviously is this, you know, is belongs to a camp, as people say, and then you have the Sequit2x and Jeff that supposedly belong to a different camp. But I'm not disposed to really entertaining those things. So without the drama, like. What do we want to say? Like, what do we want to say to this? Oh, it's asking Shinobi.
Well, I mean, I'm sure
drama is probably a difficult thing to achieve.
Well, I mean, I'm sure, like, personally, from his point of view, like, this has got to sting a little bit. I mean, this is really something that before I think this was before he started Block, but before he really started developing his own business and trying to build his own infrastructure to provide businesses in the industry, like, this was a pet project of his. But this is, like, kind of sweeping aside, like, his things or attitude about this. Like, I would say this is wonderful news. Like, it sucks that from his perspective, he might not have been the one to actually see this implemented, but the idea is implemented. Like, we have a downlink for data from the blockchain from orbit. I mean, that I would hope that he would get past his feelings and see that this is a monumental accomplishment for Bitcoin. And this isn't the time to really be stroking your own ego or like fighting over landscape to be recognized as the person who accomplished something. It's been accomplished. So now what can we do with it?
Right. Yeah, he's saying that, you know, the Blockstream are not giving credit where it's due, and yet oftentimes Adam and Greg spend tons of time on social media talking about how crediting matters and criticize those who fail to credit Bitcoin Core for its work showing up in other projects. I mean, I just I don't want to get into all this kind of this more drama stuff, but anyone.
Yeah, it's kind of semantical like nonsense though. I mean, like, I can get why he would kind of be feeling this way from an emotional point of view, but it's not like you have a patent or like a claim to the idea of putting a relay in space the same way you would as developing like an original protocol improvement or something like CoinJoin or like the sub blocks, which Peter Rizoon nicely lifted from Greg Maxwell and constantly attempts to claim.
Right. So this is the idea that in open source, when you open source something, you're giving up control. That's the whole point. You're saying, I don't want to be the owner and the controller of this going forward into the future. Someone else can take this idea and build on it. And indeed, I'm sure Blockstream are not trying to, and in fact, are probably encouraging other people to do something similar so that we can have it be more distributed in space. We can have other satellite links that we can go up to.
Yes, I'm very confident that they would be very happy to see other companies like getting in deals with this with satellite owners and having more players involved in distributing blockchain data through this mechanism. I mean, they're like,
you can see it's very much designed that way, you know. Wow.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, there's nothing to stop them from doing so. It's just taking. I mean, it's most simple. It's taking the data feed, the blockchain, moving it into orbit, and then relaying it through a different mechanism that has a different operational cost for the person receiving. Like, there's really no way that you could stop other people from doing this. And when people really start thinking about the things that this makes possible, I'm very confident that a lot of other players are going to have the incentives and the drive to actually start implementing things like this.
Right. Very good. Are there any other topics? This has been our pilot episode on Block Digest. It's been our first one, and like I said, we talked about this yesterday. We tried to get on yesterday, and maybe we started talking about this like 3 days ago, 4 days ago, and we wanted to kind of try something out and see if we could get this to work. Anything else we want to discuss for today, or do we want to think about wrapping this up?
I think we'll probably just sit here rambling on about phone loads for the next couple hours if we don't. I think we've said all the important bits, and I think there's some price to be mooning that we should get back to.
Bitcoin at an all-time high, $4,400 today. And I probably should also, in closing, just share the links to the website, bitcoinmumble.com. It's an open source community where everyone is welcome. But I also want to say that you can get the link to download the Mumble from here. And I just want to point out that, there are various different communities, as I said, within these chat rooms. And over time, there's been forking, there's been splits, there's been people going into different directions. Some want to be more trading focused, some want to be more philosophy focused. And I just want to point out that I personally, my vision for this channel is that it's agnostic to those communities. Like, this should be somewhere where anyone from any chat room should feel free to be able to join in. We can simulcast from the Mumble chat server. We didn't get that technology up for today, but we can do that in the future. But my hope is that we can do that across, it's sort of like a meta network, right? The internet is an interconnected network of networks, right? And it's a network that joins other networks together to the point where the cost of keeping that data siloed and private becomes exponentially more and more expensive. You're better off just sharing that information. So I would like to see a bridge between this community and other communities, and we're open to ideas about how to keep this decentralized, because at the moment we're very dependent on YouTube for the discovery, for people to kind of come in and talk in the little super chat room over on down below this video right here. But we are interested to hear